Okay. I have so much to say, it's not even funny, Mets fans, and I sincerely apologize in advance if I'm going to look a little rattled, look a little all over the place. I was just trying to get a nap in because I wasn't feeling great to start the day, and then I get woken up saying that not only has Kyle Schwarber landed back with the Philadelphia Phillies on a 5-year, $150 million deal, which really doesn't upset me all that much. We all knew the Phillies were the likely destination for Schwarber, unless, say, the Mets wanted Schwarber as an Alonzo replacement, but Schwarber had to be the big domino to fall first in these winter meetings. But it's the other news, and that is what we're going to highlight in this one especially. Edwin Diaz turning traitor from the New York Mets to now being an LA Dodger. Lands with the Dodgers on a 3-year, $69 million contract. Now a record-breaking average annual value for his individual 3 years there in LA. We'll find out more details as they come throughout this live show and throughout the day, but I am gutted and I'm disgusted. On one hand, I am beyond disappointed in David Stearns and the New York Mets to not get this job done. And on another hand, I'm telling myself, Edwin Diaz clearly wanted the LA Dodgers. I can't fault Edwin Diaz for wanting the LA Dodgers, but my problem is I'm a Mets fan that's looking at the Dodgers that just won back-to-back championships. Now you mean to tell me they just got the best closer in the National League? I view that man as the absolute worst right now. And I said heading into the offseason, from a fan point of view, if Edwin does in fact leave the Mets to land with a team like the LA Dodgers, it's nothing personal, Edwin, but you're dead to me. And that is the reality. No matter how much success Edwin Diaz brought to the New York Mets over the years, no matter the fact that he was a fantastic individual to be around, and I certainly loved him, the fact that he decided to land with the big bad Dodgers when that team needs no help whatsoever, it's not my fault that they botched the Tanner Scott signing a year ago. Instead, now they get their star closer yet again, and now the New York Mets will have to pivot to the B option, which is a veteran right-hander in Robert Suarez, potentially trading for a Trevor McGill that we broke down in a video early this morning that dropped right around 8 a.m. Eastern. There are routes the Mets can go down to fill the void that is Edwin Diaz, but there is no denying Edwin was the creme de la creme. He was the man the Mets had to make sure that they did not lose. And instead, we say you're talking 11:50 a.m. Eastern, that being December 9th, 2025, and Edwin Diaz just left the New York Mets. There were some signs written on the wall to Mets fans when we initially saw, of course, the initial news, which was the simple fact that, yes, of course, the Mets brought in Devin Williams on a 3-year contract with $15 million deferred, but many of us, including myself, have been under the belief that that is not going to hinder the Mets from still going after Diaz after bringing Devin Williams in. Devin Williams even stated point blank in his opening presser with the New York Mets when asked by the media his thoughts on potentially pairing with Edwin Diaz, as we know that Williams signed with the Mets when every other team that approached him wanted him to solely be their closer. He signed with the Mets, that being in Devin Williams, for the sole purpose of whoever we land along with me, it's going to be a perfect back end of the bullpen. Instead of Edwin Diaz returning to the New York Mets, he goes to quite literally the worst possible destination from a Mets fan point of view. Dodgers fans are, of course, jumping with joy because God forbid if something did not go right in their favor for a change. They've won back-to-back championships. I can care so less how any Dodger fan feels about what I'm about to say today. This is not to gas up LA. We know how dominant they are. We're here to react as Mets fans, as diehard fans are disgusted and that are gutted by the reality that Edwin Diaz has chosen LA over the Mets. And when you compare and contrast, you can't blame Edwin. I know I can't blame Edwin. The Mets don't have anything to sell. They've had losing seasons in their first 3 to 5 years under Steve Cohen. It really feels like the first 4 out of 5 when you bear in mind of how much they failed to do anything towards the end of the 2022 season. The only real high we had was 2024 after that miserable low as it first began. The point stands. When you compare and contrast, if you're Edwin Diaz, the top closer in the market, and if you're getting around the same contract that maybe, say, the Mets offered you that you get from LA, why wouldn't you be inclined to go to the LA Dodgers and try to win multiple championships there? It's an unfortunate reality. This is the one that we feared most heading in the offseason. I was under the belief that the Mets would be able to avoid the Dodgers as a serious suitor because they seemed like they weren't as palatable to spend, but the fact that Edwin Diaz not just lands on any contract, but lands lands on a 3-year contract at just $69 million total. And I understand that's a lot of money. Of course, when we break it down, let's just do the math here, everybody. 69, nice, even though that this is not a nice situation. I'm just joking as I say this. If we do the 69 divided by 3, we're looking at 23 mil average annual value or so. Again, very good money for Edwin Diaz, but this is not the most far off thing from what he was previously making, 1. And 2, the Mets either had a hard line in the sand as to how much money they were willing to spend on Edwin Diaz, or Edwin Diaz saw the Mets give a valiant effort in trying to bring him back, and he still said, you know what, I want to be an LA Dodger. So should we find out more in this live show, we will live and break it down in real time, but I am absolutely gutted, as I stated. It is impossible to feel otherwise as a Mets fan. So the majority of today's show is going to be talking about the reaction to losing Edwin Diaz. We will also talk about the Kyle Schwarber news. We'll talk more on the Schwarber news in tonight's live stream for our winter meeting coverage, separate from this one today. And should breaking news happen today that's separate from this, that's hopefully positive in Mets land, we'll get to that as well. But guys and gals, when I tell you that every single person that I know in the industry is jaw-dropped by the reality that Edwin Diaz is not a New York Met, that is exactly accurate. So many people that I know of credibility were genuinely under the belief that Edwin Diaz would return the Mets barring changes. It seemed like that there was a very increased likelihood for this to happen. Did things change in the negotiation process? Is it possible that once Devin Williams signed, the Mets' direction initially changed a little bit on the adamancy to bring back Edwin Diaz? I'm not entirely sure at this point in time, but as we connect the dots, one thing is true. The Mets wanted 3 years of Edwin Diaz. Diaz was supposedly looking for 5, even though we all thought he was really not going to get that. And in the end, Edwin Diaz lands on a contract of 3 years, $69 million total. If you are not frustrated by this as a Mets fan, then I envy the hell out of you, because I'm going through all the emotions and then some right now. Just like that, our star closer, Edwin Sugar Diaz, is no longer a New York Met. And regardless as to who the Mets bring in, whether that is, of course, going to be a, say, Robert Suarez, whether that is a trade for a blockbuster of, say, a Trevor McGill and a Freddie Peralta, which I absolutely would love, and that would make me feel a little bit less worse about this situation. There are not many arms out there that I think check off enough boxes of the profile that Edwin Diaz does. And the most concerning aspect about this, more than anything else in my opinion, is the fact that the Mets did not just lose any star closer. They lost someone who knows exactly how to dominate in big markets. They just lost someone who is notoriously known for coming out of the rut initially as a New York Met in 2019. Part of that trade with the Seattle Mariners, Robinson Cano and Jared Kelenic, and of course, some other pieces, smaller pieces, part of that puzzle. Edwin was scared of his own shadow in year 1 in Flushing, Queens. Could not handle a save to save his life there that we saw in 2019. And every single Mets fan saying that this is going to be a terrible trade. It's not going to grade out well. Jared Kelenic's going to be star. Edwin Diaz is going to be horrendous. But as the years went on, Edwin got better and better, which led him to his breakout 2022 season with the New York Mets, winning the Trevor Hoffman NL Reliever of the Year award, getting the 5-year, $100+ million contract, then, of course, opting out of his deal this year, making it known that he wants to return to the Mets after another fantastic season in his walk year. And that is the commonality with Edwin Diaz. The 2 best seasons he's had in a Mets uniform were in his walk years. Try to incentivize to get that back. Is it possible that Edwin will regress slightly next year because he's part of the big bad Dodgers now and doesn't have to be as stressed out? That's certainly a possibility. It wouldn't shock me if that is in fact the reality too. But what's the reality in the meantime is that regardless as to if Edwin Diaz made this decision because he's like, you know what, I want to win a championship, the Dodgers put me in the best position to do so, and this was solely on maximizing the dollars and going where the dollars were most present. If the Mets maybe offered a little less, whatever the case may be, the Mets now have massive shoes to fill, because Edwin Diaz was so much more than just a star closer for this Mets team. And we're going to get to your comments, questions in this one. I assure you, everybody, we're going to break it all down. Edwin Diaz finishes his Mets tenure ranked 3rd in franchise history with 144 saves behind John Franco and Armando Benitez. The fact that that is where he's going to finish his Mets tenure and potentially his Mets career ever, unless the Mets bring Edwin Diaz back after he wins a couple championships and screwed over the Mets in this instance. I don't exactly know what's going to happen. But what I do know is that Edwin brought so much to the table, everybody. Oh my God. I'm reading this right now. Let's see. I'm reading a lot of things right now regarding what's happening in the industry. I'm hearing at the moment that the Mets are still involved in a lot of player markets. Things are going to be busy. The Mets are inevitably going to land someone as soon as today because they can't sit on their hands now after they lost someone like Edwin Diaz. But I want a simple reaction to everyone watching live on a replay before we continue to break this down in its entirety. Of course, the initial news was broken from my guy, our friend on the platform, Will Salmon. This is one of the scoops I wish Will never had because this is such a deflating feeling right now. He had the Devin Williams scoop first, and he also had the Edwin Diaz scoop first. But let me make my point clear. Do I have any personal ill will against Edwin Diaz? No. I'm just really frustrated and really gutted from a fan point of view. I've loved Edwin Diaz, and he's someone that I've really admired how much he initially faced adversity in Flushing, Queens, overcame it, of course became this folk hero in a way between the trumpets in 2022, being the most dominant closer imaginable that we've seen in quite some time, literally wiping the floor with the previous stud, that being Andres Familia, going back to the mid-2010s for us. Diaz was our certainty. He was our safe blanket, and he was the guy that this year alone, and the Mets bullpen that was filled with turmoil, he was our lone certainty with the exception of Brooks Raley. I loved Edwin Diaz, and now I have to hate him, and it pisses me off so much that I have to hate him, but I'm a Mets fan first instead of a player fan first. And when a player that I've admired just went to the worst team imaginable, for me to not instead of root for, but to absolutely be disgusted with, that's why we were in the position that we are. Edwin Diaz meant so much to this organization, both on and off the field. His charity work, his community work that he did around the New York Mets organization was admirable. He gave back to this team in more ways than one. And for everything that he brought him and his family, he will be sorely missed. I wish him well in his future endeavors, but I also hope that he has a 5+ ERA next season and is a factor behind the Dodgers not getting as far as they should be because their big signing did not work out. Nothing personal, Edwin, but I'm wishing the absolute worst on your future success there with the LA Dodgers, because the New York Mets now, as I said, have massive shoes to fill for this closer role. And while there are feasible to a degree options out there, Robert Suarez is nice. He throws absolute gas. Trevor McGill throws absolute gas. And it makes so much more sense as to why the Mets are in his market right now, because they probably got the sign as of the past 24 hours or so that Edwin was not returning to them. So when we connect the dots and we put all the pieces together, it was becoming abundantly clear that Edwin was not returning. We just need to go out and see it for what it was. When the Devin Williams signing happened, it was easy to disregard that given the structure of the payout and knowing that Devin purposely signed with the Mets while having the utmost hope that Edwin Diaz may still return to this club or that the Mets are going to do more something along those lines. I can also tell you guys in confidence that when we look at what happened with Kyle Schwarber today, the Mets like Kyle Schwarber. They put in a very valiant effort of an offer in for Schwarber. However, Schwarber went to the best suitor, which was still the Phillies in the end. And that is something that I really don't fault Schwarber as much for. I don't think the Mets necessarily went to the same years as they did for Kyle, but they gave him a very good looking AAV from everything that I've been told in the industry. So we'll find out more details on the Schwarber fund. I'm not losing sleep over Kyle. I would have loved him, but he was more in the scenario where you don't bring Pete back. But now what does this mean for Pete Alonzo? What does this mean for the Mets' focus? Because it's one thing to sell to the fan base that you lost your star closer heading into next season. Regardless as to what you do to fill that void, it's still going to have a sour taste in Mets fans' mouth with the uncertainty of not knowing how that pitcher will actually look adjusted in Flushing, Queens, the way that we knew how much of a certainty Edwin Diaz was. But it's another if you mean to tell me that the Mets roll into 2026 without WardyNYM, without Edwin Diaz, and without Pete Alonzo. You know, we expected some massive change this offseason, but I'd be lying if I said that I necessarily expected it to this degree. I always felt most confident that Edwin Diaz, between himself and Pete Alonzo, would be the likely man to stay put and stay in the organization. But that is not the reality that we find ourselves in now. So how do the Mets adjust? How do they pivot? Well, as you guys can see here, even though he's relaying what is common knowledge, John Morosi of MLB did state that with Edwin Diaz off the market, the Mets and Blue Jays are among the top suitors for Robert Suarez. And again, Robert Suarez is not at all a bad consolation prize, and that's the wrong Suarez I meant to click on, so my apologies for that. Let me go ahead and find the right Suarez I want to talk about with you guys. There are plenty of things to like about Robert Suarez. Throws absolute gas. Him and Devin Williams can be a lethal 1-2 punch in this Mets bullpen. It's not that the Mets can't build a super bullpen moving forward. It's just the simple fact that of all options that were immediately available out there, who checked off the most boxes? It was and still is Edwin Diaz. And where did Edwin Diaz go? To the evil empire, the worst position imaginable. I'm honestly sure that this is to a degree how Yankees fans felt with Juan Soto going to the Mets last year, just in the sense of being gutted, like distraught. I'm sure maybe it's not the exact same level of feeling because we've actually had connection with Edwin for years, and it wasn't just, you know, that cute girlfriend that you had for a year and then she didn't want you back, that being Juan in the case of Yankees fans. But the point still stands. This is heartbreak. Like, for me, there's no other way to put it. I'm so upset by this, genuinely, because I'm really caught off guard by it. I'm blindsided. I've been more mentally prepared for a Pete Alonzo to land with Boston, or God forbid the Phillies if Schwarber say sign with the Mets, than I was mentally prepared for Edwin Diaz, of all people, to be leaving this organization. So let's get a poll going in the live chat. Let's answer some comments, because I know we have a lot to talk about in this one, everybody. Smash that like and subscribe button on your way in. I know you don't want to hit that like button right now. I don't blame you. We're all upset. We're all distraught together. But just know it's a very good way to support the platform. Thank you so much for doing exactly that. Let's get the poll going. Oh, my God. Oh, my goodness gracious. I'm so upset. I am so upset. I feel like I'm going to throw up. Dodgers offered. So was $3 million really the difference maker in this decision? I'm inclined to believe no. I'm sorry. Was it $3 million going from New York to LA really the decider? Probably not. What more than likely happened is that he chose the LA Dodgers. Now, could the Mets have went 4 years? I don't know. Here's the thing. If I'm in David Stearns' shoes, I want to go 4 years for Edwin Diaz. Because why would you second guess it? So I see both sides of the coin here. Both sides of the coin here. I see one side saying, why couldn't you give Edwin the 4th year? And I see another side saying, was Edwin going to go to the Dodgers regardless? Because if the Mets won 4 years, maybe the Dodgers would have won 4 years. Because the Mets are not going to bid against themselves. They knew that they were matching up with a Dodger team that was offering around the same contract. At least what we know right now. So my reaction to this is, one, I'm still pissed off at Stearns. I'm not happy with the Mets right now. I'm far from it. It's hard to be happy in this very moment when you lose a star closer. I'm not saying David did everything wrong, but I'm saying I'm not happy. And from Diaz's point of view, breaking it down, not his point of view, but breaking down how I feel about him, I'm disgusted and I'm disgruntled that he chose the big bad Dodgers. I understand why he did, but it doesn't change the fact that I'm still rightfully pissed off about it. Aha! Proving my point! Fuck you, Edwin! Damn it, Edwin! Mets expressed that there was wiggle room to go higher, but Diaz went to the Dodgers. Oh my God! This is what I'm telling you. This is why it makes sense. Now I'm less mad at Stearns. Now I retract some of my comments on Stearns. The Mets were willing to go higher, but Edwin wanted the Dodgers. No shit, he wanted the Dodgers. Of course he wanted the Dodgers. Oh, and stop it. Stop acting like wiggle room is $500K extra. That's nonsense. You really think the Steve Cohen-ran Mets are saying wiggle room is just a couple 100,000 more? Shut up. Literally just shut up. No clue what you're talking about. Yes, the Mets didn't match the offer because he wasn't coming back. Wrap it around your brains. Source: Mets expressed that there was wiggle room to go higher, but Diaz went to the Dodgers. About? Please, everybody, just read what is beside me. I'm at a loss for words a little bit. Here's 4 years, 100 million. No, we have wiggle room. Mark, there's no distinction as to what that wiggle room is. The point stands. The Mets were willing to go above and beyond for Diaz. They were willing to offer more than the Dodgers, and Edwin said he preferred LA. So stop thinking, oh, but what if we gave him 4 years, 100 million? He didn't want us. He didn't want us relative to what his market was. And I'm sorry. Why? Pardon my French, kiddos, earmuffs. Profanity for a second. Why the flipping fuck would the New York Mets want to bend over backwards for someone who made it abundantly clear he preferred LA? Doesn't that tell you what you need to know? He didn't want to be here as much as he wanted to win a championship with the Dodgers next season. And you can't fault him for that. You can be mad at it, but you can't fault him for just wanting to win championships. He always had a greater route to do that with the Dodgers than he ever did with the New York Mets. That was always the case. After the latest news, I have a feeling Uncle Steve has this same disappointed feeling as us fans, so he'll be more involved with Stearns. Of course. This is just the tip of the iceberg. Of course. No doubt. Mets need to fire David the Wilpon Stearns. You guys are in for a rude awakening when you find out that David Stearns will be the Mets president for the next number of years. Okay? He will not be going anywhere in the immediate future. So you can go about this in two ways. You can either go with the way of, I hate David Stearns no matter what he does, or you can go with the way of hoping that the Mets have success this offseason and are able to get the best deals possible after Diaz decided to go to LA. Which sword do you want to fall on? Do you want to just continue to say that Stearns is at fault for everything? Because it's only going to make life worse for you, okay? I have been on this platform many times saying my frustration of David, my frustration for Mendoza, my frustration for previous regimes. But what did all those frustrations have in common? More often than not, it's regarding guys that aren't immediately leaving as much as they wanted them to. David Stearns is not going anywhere, as much as you guys love or hate to hear that. So understanding that, how do we move forward? You move forward by doing the best that you can this offseason. There's no other route to go if you're the Mets right now. We got Ray with the $10 holla. It's not about the money anymore. People want to play for Friedman because he shows he will always try to win versus Stearns, who always tries to cut costs and not take risk. I wouldn't say that's always true regarding Stearns, but I agree that the track record is far more in favor of LA and Friedman than it is Stearns. There's no denying that. And that is absolutely a fact. I will not fault you for saying that. Exactly. You would do the same thing. Mets should have offered Diaz 5 years if they knew Diaz was going to leave. At least the Dodgers would have to eat those final 2 years. LOL. But while I understand that in theory, and I see the idea, okay, if we give him a 5-year deal, the Dodgers would have to match it. But do you not think that there's possibility that even if the Mets went 4 years, Diaz still would have settled with 3 with the Dodgers? Understand this quote right here. Mets expressed that there was wiggle room to go higher, but Diaz went to the Dodgers. And the Mets made it clear and expressed that they were willing to go farther beyond what the Dodgers were offering. It still doesn't matter because Diaz made his decision. He wanted LA. A source confirmed on Tuesday, ending his time in the New York Mets after seven years and 6 full seasons. The Mets' final offer was 3 years, $66 million with slight deferrals, according to a source, and the team officials made it known that they had room to improve. However, Diaz chose the Dodgers before that happened. This is a DeGrom situation, point blank. Even though I think the Mets were less inclined to go farther for DeGrom, the Mets were not even able to give a final say in DeGrom because he ultimately chose the Rangers. There's a lot of similarities here. A lot of similarities. And guys, the show comment got me at first, but now I don't care because now you're just trying to burst my bubble. Quite literally, I don't care. Say whatever you want. It doesn't matter to me. You guys can say what you want. That's fine. At the end of the day, you're giving me the ad revenue. I appreciate that, and you're helping with the clicks and the traction on the show. Thank you for that. I appreciate it a lot. You're... let's pump the brakes, Wardy. You know what you're going to say. You know what you're going to say. You're going to get clipped. You got to calm down. DeComo said Diaz never circled back. That is correct. We will do something big today. I hope we will. Diaz is Durant. #steak. Thank you for the donation. Stearns don't believe windows. He don't believe in paying players over the age of 30. LO. Diaz saw the Mets moving in a different direction and ring chase. Appreciate the donation, but the Mets were still planning to spend this offseason. They were planning to offer more for him, but he said no thank you. My guy Grant, if someone, and Grant, I know I got to hit you back on what I promised from yesterday. I sincerely apologize. Once your meeting's got me all messed up right now. If someone doesn't want to be on our team, you don't sign them. He wanted to go to the Dodgers. It's not hard to comprehend. No, it really isn't hard to comprehend at all. At all. It makes a lot of sense. Do you think Edwin Diaz leaving for the Dodgers means he didn't trust Mets organization to get... Of course. Of course. But this is what I'm trying to reiterate, guys. It doesn't matter how much the Mets could have tried selling Diaz on what the future looks like. Future means fickle when you want results. Literally results. Why are we now acting like that isn't the case? If you're in Edwin Diaz's shoes, it's point blank. If the Dodgers want you and want to give you a lot of money, give you a high AAV, historic AAV for relievers, and the Mets were willing to go even higher than that, but they don't have the track record. If you're Edwin, if you're trying to rain chase, look what's right in front of you. Every single player and their mother makes that same decision. If their priority is to win now. The Mets are not the team that is going to benefit you most in a win now stage. The LA Dodgers, it's the LA Dodgers, then it's a gap, and then it's everyone else, okay? And that's because the Dodgers have back-to-back championships to show. Rich Mendez with the $10. Oh, thank you, Rich. Maybe he didn't like the clubhouse atmosphere. Maybe he felt bad for Nimmo and how McNeil was being treated. Maybe the Dodgers look happier, more united. He's a dumbbell anyway, so who knows? Here's the thing. All those things are valid. But again, you can't fault the Mets for wanting to make drastic change after failing in 2025, nor can you fault Edwin Diaz for wanting to go to a team that's going to give him the best chance to win while getting paid really good money. So even if the Mets offered, say, 4 years, it doesn't matter. He didn't want to return. Yeah, no, if the Dodgers traded for Tarek Skubal, I actually might not cover the Mets in 2026. I'm not even exaggerating. If the Dodgers land Tarek Skubal, I may not cover the Mets next season. I'm only half joking as I say that. At some point, what's the point of even watching? Genuinely. Oh, so we can have some fun and watch some summer baseball, eat some hot dogs, spend $50 on parking, spend an additional $200 just for nosebleed seats in a normal regular season matchup against the Philadelphia Phillies just to see us lose 5-4 in extra innings. Miss me with that bullshit, okay? I love baseball. I love the Mets to death. But if the Dodgers land Skubal, if the Dodgers do even more things to make themselves, like if the Dodgers land Tucker, if they do something along those lines, it is so disheartening to even want to care about next season. Genuinely. I'm aware of what the Mets offer was to Sherman, from Sherman that we saw. Let's see here. I'm just making sure that I don't miss any breaking news. Guys, I'm not even lying. I'm getting relayed information right now that the Mets did in fact offer Diaz north of 4 years, and he still wasn't having it. Proves the point. Proof in the pudding. The Mets were willing to go above and beyond what the Dodgers were initially insinuating, but the Dodgers were able to settle at 3 years because he was comfortable with that number. This was not nearly as much about money as it was about going to a championship organization. Obviously, money plays a factor, but it wasn't the sole decider, if that makes sense. Kyle Schwarber now goes to the Philadelphia Phillies, 5 years, $150 million. This was the expected contract that Schwarber was going to be getting somewhere along those lines. But now that we see Schwarber go ahead and get around an AAV of $30 million a year, one does beg the question, what's Pete Alonso going to get now? Because this is going to impact his market inevitably. Alonso has more value because he can play first and DH. But there's the jury's still out there that Schwarber was more of the guaranteed thing in a bat between himself and Alonso to some on the power front. So is Alonso still going to get what he's hoping for of at least north of 5 years, a similar range? If Schwarber's getting 5 years, 150, is Alonso desperate in need of like a 5-year, $165 to $170 million deal? Or is Alonso going to get high AAV but more on the 3 to 4 year range? I think he's going to get the 3 to 4 year range, truthfully. I don't think Alonzo's going to get 5 years, even after Schwarber got 5. And the reason why I say that is I don't know if Alonzo's market is in his favor to the degree that Schwarber had a greater market. And why did Schwarber have a greater market? Because he was a better fit for organizations that were looking for a power lefty bat in their organizations. Today's MLB does not care about power from the right side as much as they do from the left. That's a fact. Mainly because who do you face more often than not on the rotation and bullpen front? You're facing more of a workload from right-handers than you are left-handers in the normal 162 of a season. And because of that, teams love the idea of having power implemented from the left side of the plate especially, more than the right. That's a fact. That's what we've seen how these markets have shaped over the years. So Alonzo, I'm sure he's salivating at the mouth for 5 years, $150 million. But I have an honest belief that he's not going to get 5 years. I think Alonzo is going to land in the 3 to 4 year range. And NYM, I believe I did see your super, but I'll go back to double check for sure. Nationals own the Mets. I mean, okay, but I thank you so much for the donation. I love the fact that a Nationals fan gave me money to say that the Nationals own the Mets. I mean, we all live in our own senses of delusion, but I'm glad that I'm not the only one here. Thank you so much for that nonetheless. That was actually pretty that actually cheered me up a little bit because that was such a stupid comment. Let's see. Z with the $10 holla says, ever consider an owner or GM more concerned about selling hot dogs, beers, private suites than winning, especially the Mets? No, because you're genuinely an idiot if you think the Mets' focus is more so on wanting to prioritize the asses in the seats and the money that they're making than what they're trying to put on their on-field product. Steve Cohen didn't need to buy the Mets. Everything has been a loss for Steve Cohen since buying the Mets. Do you not understand that? The Mets had a financial loss this past year of $350+ million. But yeah, surely the $20+ billion net worth man has a high priority as a diehard Mets fan that he bought the Mets solely for revenue. Literally, you are so out of touch, it's not even funny. And I don't mean that rudely, I mean that honestly. If any rational Mets fan comes to the conclusion that Steve Cohen bought the organization for the sense of self-interest in the front of just financial gain instead of trying to make the club the best that they can possibly be, I have a bridge to sell you. If the Mets were still under the Will Ponzian regime right now, they would have lost Edwin Diaz after the 2022 season. The Mets would be in no shape to try to at least build to have continued success, even if they fail to do so in the first 5 years under Cohen. It has not been for a lack of effort in many fronts of what Steve Cohen has done. Are we forgetting the Juan Soto contract? Are we forgetting so many great things that they have done? Like, we are literally living in delusion with that kind of comment. Genuinely. I could give the Mets massive flack for right now regarding Edwin Diaz. It's the following. Shame on you, New York Mets, for all the years you had dominant Edwin Diaz and you did absolutely nothing with it. You have yourselves to blame. We can pick and prod all we want on Edwin Diaz preferring the Dodgers, being a snake, this and that, but the only reason why he became a snake is because of the fact that the Mets don't have anything of semblance of continued success for him to lean on and suggest, okay, that's worthy for me to continue to stay in Queens. The Mets being a losing team of 3 the first 5 years under Cohen, the Mets having very little success with Diaz throughout his entire tenure, all played massive factors into this decision-making. And that, my friends, is where the New York Mets have themselves to blame. Both things can be true. You can say you're pissed off at Edwin Diaz for not even giving the Mets like a true shot, a final say in this, while you can also say that while that is true, what's also true is the fact that the New York Mets never properly positioned themselves, other than financial, to actually put themselves in the best spot to bring Edwin Diaz back. They didn't. They didn't. Oh, the dam is going to break now for player movement. One to watch, Ketel Marte. I would love Ketel Marte, but now that we trade for Marcus Semien, more than likely isn't going to happen now. My guess is Ketel Marte gets traded to a team like the Red Sox. Again, guys, both things can be true. Diaz wanted LA, but he wanted LA because the Mets don't have any success to pitch. The Mets could say, oh, yeah, the next 5 years are going to be so great, Edwin. We're so confident. We're so positioned to have success. But words are words. When you have a team that can literally go up and show you, hey, you want to touch our World Series ring? We just got it out the box. Oh, let me Sorry, just had to get the dust off of our World Series ring from 2024. Which one do you think will fit your finger better? Let's get your sizing right now, so that way when we win in 2026, you're all set. Like, when you get that kind of pitch from a team like the Dodgers, there's nothing you can do. There's literally nothing you could do. And this is what separates having financial flexibility from being a greatly ran organization that's flexed a financial muscle, that has also given up an abundance of top prospect assets over the years to get to where they now are.